And thank you to Adelphi, Fabian Burrell, and Mr. Thornburg for inviting me to be here. I'm glad to be here. I am a mother with a current demand in progress seeking police accountability across the board nationwide. It is a demand that developed over years following the death of my son at the hands of NYPD. His death and the actions of police concerning it brought me into an acute knowledge of the racism and failings of police. Communities of color across the United States are flooded with police, and the reasons given are crime. Crime prevention and the protecting and serving of people is the #1 claim of police, accepted and approved with everything from military equipment and government funding in order to get the job done. But on October of 2004, my son became an innocent victim of a bullet intended for somebody else. He had been shot and wounded and was being carried by those who were with him to the hospital 1 block away. Police arrived and interrupted that process, demanding they put him down. Their pleas and insistence to police he had been shot meant nothing, nor did the fact the hospital was directly in front of them. The assistance needed was not of importance, nor the injury, or that his life hung in the balance. What was important was that they obeyed. And when they continued to insist, they themselves were threatened with being shot if they didn't put him down. My son died on the street across from Lincoln Hospital, a victim of a crime for which police neither protected nor aided and assisted. To know his death could have been avoided and have medical examiners determine he had every probable chance of survival had he gotten the medical attention which was needed, pushed me to probe deeply concerning the claims to protect and to serve. For he was neither protected nor did they render the service needed. Had the hospital been across town, I could understand, but it was directly in front from where they all stood. The need to assess and secure the situation is also understood, but those with him weren't running away as those who were involved in a crime would do. They were en route to the hospital directly in front of all. In this regard, the failure of police to protect and serve was clear. What they offered resulted in death, one that could have been avoided. The liability of police regarding that death was dismissed in federal court because the court said the actions of police had not shocked the conscience. So a black male left to die on the curb by police is not shocking here in America. But today we are here to examine race and the part it plays in policing. Because I have initiated a nationwide demand, my interests in regards to police are beyond what happened to my son. And that interest developed as a result of repeated instances of murder by police for which none were being held accountable. And while the murdered were predominantly blacks and Hispanics, ever increasingly it has touched all people, irregardless to social standing, education, or community they happen to live in. Yet, race remains the primary target, the primary focus behind the actions of police. And no clearer example can be given than that of stops and frisks, a policy by which blacks and Hispanics were specifically targeted for arrests and summonses, irregardless to whether it was warranted. Thousands and thousands were illegally stopped, searched, and often cussed out and brutalized in the process, simply for asking the question, why am I being stopped? Within that practice was a quota, requiring police to execute the policy based upon a quota, not upon actual violations being committed, not upon reason to suspect a crime had been committed, but solely on the need to generate numbers while instilling fear and control within communities of color. Aside from the mental and emotional damage incurred by those who suffered underneath the policy, and aside from the court ruling that stops and frisks violated the constitutional rights of thousands, as well as racially profiled poor blacks and Hispanics, political officials up to and including the mayor of that time yet insisted to keep their stops and frisks such as it is. So if we talk about race and the part it plays within policing, we must look at those setting policy and the objective and the outcome of said policies. The policy on stop and frisk was the biggest blunder of all time. Not only did it waste the money of taxpayers, but it failed to either solve or prevent crime. And though the numbers bear witness to those facts, they did not care. And if political officials have the audacity to publicly insist on a policy by which their own records show their failure and for which thousands have been wasted in taxpayer money and the Supreme Court rules against them, advising constitutional violations and racial profiling occurred, then why do we yet question the part race has to do with policing? The policies and the laws being implemented in our day speak for themselves. It's bigger than the cop out on the street. It's bigger than a claim of protecting and serving. Race is the bait by which white Americans are allowed to exclude themselves from being viewed as the target, exclude themselves out of interest and concern. None but the victims themselves are demanding justice against the unjust. And their faces are black and brown and yellow. And those faces are habitually plastered in the media with captions that read, drug bust, gang violence, an innocent bystander shot in a drive-by shooting. What is the effect and the power of media to deem an entire population of people criminal? If I were to say to you, a drug bust occurred on such and such a street, be honest and admit that what comes to mind as I tell a story are black faces. And then ask yourself, why is it? For whites buy and consume drugs just as much as black folks, if not more. So media is instrumental in painting entire populations of people of color as criminal. And if that is believed, then what is the level of interest and concern when blacks are murdered by police? What are the chances of being falsely arrested and automatically deemed guilty? If society on the whole believes these things to be true about people of color, then the focus of police, with the approval of society, becomes people of color. And the justifications being allowed for their murders are beliefs that they are, in fact, criminals. So the problem is deemed a black problem, not anything white America has to concern herself with. It is indeed a black problem, which whites, for the most part, have ignored far too long. But ignoring is not the only thing being done. They are complicit in their failure to acknowledge the part in which they've played concerning its furtherance. For justification is not given solely by police and the courts of the land. It is given by society at large, who hear of an outright murder of police, yet insist they must have done something to deserve it. The inability of white America to wrap its head around the idea police kill outright unarmed innocent people goes against the grain of what they have been taught to believe concerning themselves. They would rather place blame on the victim than acknowledge that they have been lied to and deceived concerning America and all she claims to stand for. There are claims to take America back by whites who do not like what they see America turning into. The demand is just, but misplaced. There cannot be justice without a proper assessment of the wrong committed. And there can be no harmony with racism when it is in fact the deharmonizer. There will be no accord under conditions where one resolves the position of superior is their rightful godly ordination. And if we are earnest, we must be brave and courageous enough to accept truth as it is presented, whether or not it lines up with what we have been taught to believe concerning ourselves. And if we can't, then admitting this can be at least the first step in being truthful. Thank you.
Hello. I'm Ebony.